Das reicht schon. Martha Roskowski.
I got on a plane Tuesday during the day to fly from Colorado, where I live, to Frankfurt, and there was no Wi-Fi on the plane. And so the plane landed in Frankfurt, and I pulled up my iPhone, and I learned that the horror had actually happened. And if I start crying up here, it's not because of you. It's because of what we have unleashed on the world. I will say that 51% of us, at least in the United States, will fight with all of our hearts to minimize the damage that we cause to both our country and the rest of the world, okay? Okay, all right. It's going to be a really interesting 4 years. Okay, I will also say I had not seen Philip Christ's presentation, but I almost feel like I don't need to give mine because he said a lot of what I was going to say. But I will give the on-the-ground version of what's happening in the United States. It's not just about New York. It's not just about complete streets. I'm going to take you on a journey of what we've been doing at People for Bikes recently and what's happening in the US. So one moment while I type in my password. For my German friends who missed my introduction, I'll just say I apologize for Donald Trump. I'm horrified. I'm going to try not to start crying right here. Okay, onward. I work for People for Bikes. We are a national organization in the United States. We were started by the bicycle industry of the United States. The heads of Trek and Specialized and SRAM and all of the big bike manufacturers got together realizing that they compete against each other to sell bicycles, but they also need to work together to grow the market of people who ride bicycles. So they all contribute a small portion of their gross revenues to People for Bikes to fund our advocacy work. So that's who we are. I am the Vice President of Local Innovation, and so my work is focused on helping cities build better bike infrastructure. So I'm going to take you on a quick tour of the work we've been doing and what we've learned in the United States. I will say Germany is ahead of the United States in terms of bicycling. Your recreational bike culture, your tourism bike culture is far ahead of where we are. We'll hear from Saskia about the Netherlands, which is way ahead of all of us. But we are learning some things, and we are moving quickly. And I hope that some of it will prove useful to folks here at ADFC and in Germany. So thank you to Burkhart for inviting me. And I had a wonderful day yesterday in Cologne, learned some about local bike infrastructure, local politics, sort of the design side of bikeways. All right, so here we go. Should I read these so they get translated? I hate people who read their PowerPoints, but I will do that. So People for Bikes is uniting millions of individuals, thousands of businesses, and hundreds of communities to make bike riding better for everyone. We are very clearly about getting more people on bikes more often. So there's an element of our work to make conditions better for people who ride bikes today, but more of our focus is on how we get more people riding bikes. So step one that we've been through is rethink who rides bikes. And so this is where Philip stole some of my best material, but it's okay, he went first. So this is the stereotype of who rides bikes in America. White men, comfortable on the road. They believe that if you just act like a car, that's where you're going to fare best. And the system works for them. Or this is who rides bikes in America, is again white men who are strong and fast and bold. Or this is who rides bikes in America, guys with tattoos and bike messengers, and you know, it's a subculture, there's an identity to it. But when you look at who actually rides bikes in America, it's a different picture. So this is a study that we did a few years ago of 11,000 people, what we called a participation study. And what we found is that 1/3 of people in America rode a bike at least once in the last year. So that's 103 million people. And most of those people ride only occasionally. So that's this end of the graph. So more than half of both men and women only rode between once in the last year and once every 2 weeks in the last year. So that population of bold white guys on bikes is at the other end of the graph, and they're the very frequent riders. So there's a whole swath of people that we need to do better at reaching, and that's been our mission at People for Bikes. We do it through language, so we don't call them cyclists. We call them people who ride bikes. Because I am a person who rides a bike, I'm also a person who drives, I'm a person who gardens, I'm a person who bakes pies. I'm not just a cyclist. So language is important in terms of how you talk about people riding bikes. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is interesting work by a guy named Roger Geller from Portland, Oregon, who did a survey work of people and their attitudes, how they self-identified in terms of biking. And what he found was that 1/3 of people, the no way, no how, say they will never ride bikes, usually due to age or ability. Not so much as like, I'm going to drive my pickup truck and vote for Donald Trump and I'm never going to ride a bike. It was usually that they weren't physically able to, or they lived someplace where it just wasn't going to be practical for them. Another 7%, that blue swath up there, said they're enthused and confident, like they can ride on today's system. They like it, it works for them, they're happy. 1%, that tiny black swath up there, is what we call strong and fearless. They can ride anywhere. They're just fine. Most interesting to us is that green block, the interested but concerned. Those are people who say they're interested in riding bikes, but they don't because they're concerned, and their top concern is about safety. In our country, it's that they don't feel safe riding on the streets with traffic. And safety is a very primal thing. If you don't feel safe, you don't do it. And all the marketing in the world cannot convince you that it's okay to do something that doesn't feel safe to you. So that has led us on a mission, one, to really broaden how we talk about people riding bikes, how we show people riding bikes, and also to get to the root causes of addressing those safety concerns in the United States. One of the things that we've done is created a character. Her name is Isabella. She's 12 years old. And the idea is that when our traffic engineers go out to design new bike facilities, they should be designing it for Isabella, so that a 12-year-old could ride comfortably there, or so that that 12-year-old's mother would be okay with Isabella going out on a bicycle. So we have a whole campaign called Build It for Isabella, this idea that let's build bike infrastructure that everybody can use. It goes by various names, 8 to 80, like 8 years old to 80 years old, all ages and abilities. The language is pretty vague because we're still just working on these concepts. So what we realize is that the core of our work is building better places for bikes, changing how our streets work. So for a long time, this is what we've done for bike infrastructure in the United States. And I will tell you, paint is not infrastructure. It doesn't really work. This doesn't help with the interested but concerned, even if you put a nice bike symbol out there in traffic. This doesn't work for the interested but concerned, okay? That's a 35-mile-an-hour street, so that's about 50 kilometers an hour. And, you laugh because you look at that, you're like, I wouldn't ride a bike there. We also have research. New research has come out that these kind of just slap down some paint on the street does nothing to slow the speed of traffic, and it does nothing to increase people on bikes. Our planners, some of them really like this because then they get to check the box and say, ooh, we built a bike network. Done, done, done. Okay, here's another one, right? Great place to ride a bike. So this has led me to this concept that I want to share with you, that in terms of design, we have tended to think about bikes as either being slow cars or fast pedestrians. In the United States, we've gone down the slow cars route, right? Just stick them out in the street with the cars. They behave, bikes are vehicles. They're just a little bit slower than the cars, so they can be fine just out in the streets. What I saw the last couple of days here in Mannheim and in Cologne is that here there's been somewhat of this fast pedestrians idea, that you could just put a stripe down the sidewalk and stick the bikes on the sidewalk, and somehow that would work really well. And both of those approaches have merit and are okay in some instances. They work in places where the cars actually go slow. They work in places where there's enough space for both pedestrians and bicycles and the volumes aren't really high. But what we really need is a third category of places that are just built for people on bikes. So it's that middle ground where we've been working in the United States. So this is a US bike lane. We have been building these for 50 years in the United States. Actually, next year will be the 50-year anniversary of the first bike lane in the United States in Davis, California. We're gonna have a big party. Okay, so consider it a 50-year experiment, right? We have built hundreds of miles of these bike lanes, and we have less than 1% of our population that bikes to work in the United States. So to me, that's pretty good data that these are not the answer if you're serious about more people riding bikes. That stripe of paint does not make most people feel really comfortable riding. It does nothing to stop the cars from veering over into the space for bikes. So what we need to build really are connected bicycle systems, complete systems. All right, New York City. New York City was in the title. I'm only talking a little bit about New York City, but we're there. So in 2007, Mayor Michael Bloomberg and his transportation commissioner, a woman named Jeanette Sadiq-Khan, started building protected bike lanes. So they went to Copenhagen, they talked with Jan Gehl, they did a lot of thinking about the streets of New York, and they came up with a concept that streets are public spaces. That is public space, that they are the largest landholder in New York City, not Donald Trump, right? That the New York City Department of Transportation has more land than anybody else, and that they should think more carefully about how that land gets used. So they started building things like this. This was 2007 on 8th Avenue in New York City. They admit today that they sort of overbuilt this, right? There's that great big pedestrian crossing in the middle. There's a lot of extra space, but they wanted it to work. So this was the first modern, what we call protected bike lane in the United States. We looked at that and we said, that's what we need. We need more of these in the United States. Up until this time, our design manuals said you could not build these, that it did not have any mention of how to build a facility like this. So the traffic engineers, when people would go to them and say, hey, can we do stuff like they do in the Netherlands and in Copenhagen, the traffic engineers would say, no, 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 it's not allowed. So New York City really changed the game by just going out and building these anyway. Here's Chicago, started not too long after that. My colleague over here, Randy Neufeld from Chicago, who is one of the very smartest people I know and my great co-conspirator on everything I've done in my career. I owe it all to Randy. He was behind getting the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, to pledge to build 100 miles of protected bike lanes in his first term in office. So this is one of the first protected bike lanes. It's on Kinsey Street in Chicago. If you see, this is a pretty simple design. They pulled the parking out from the curb. This used to be 4 lanes of traffic. So they took away 2 lanes of traffic, they pulled the parking out, they put in more paint, they added these plastic posts, we call them flex posts, as delineators to say this is a place for bikes. They also, if you notice, the parking stops well back of the stop sign, so that as the bikes come up to the intersection, they're more visible to turning traffic. So they tried to alleviate those concerns. You'll see there's another facility on the other side of the street. So Randy and I and some others brainstormed and came up with this project, the Green Lane Project, as a way to advance protected bike lanes in the United States. So our idea was, let's find 6 cities that are ready to go, where they've got great mayors like Rahm Emanuel in Chicago. They have city staff that's on board. They have good advocates. They have projects in the pipeline. And let's help them succeed in building these. And so, because what we wanted to do with this is get these protected bike lanes on the ground in United States cities, get them into the design toolbox so that every traffic engineer could build those, and established as the gold standard for busy streets. So that when a city went out to have a conversation about what do we do about this street, people were saying, build protected bike lanes. So this is Market Street in San Francisco. It is the main corridor through downtown San Francisco. They put in, again, a pretty simple installation of paint and posts and saw bike traffic increase significantly along that corridor. Here's Vancouver. Not quite United States, but Vancouver's doing brilliant work, so I've included some photos there. Again, the parking is pulled out from the curb to create a separate place for bikes. If you can see way down toward the intersection, there's some concrete, there's a curb, and green paint. If you're going to use color on bike lanes in the United States, the color is green. So I wish we were doing blue or red. We're not consistent, you know. Netherlands uses red, Denmark uses blue, we use green. You guys could come up with a new color. We needed to define what these are, so they are exclusively for people on bikes, so separate from the sidewalk, separate from motor vehicles, has some kind of vertical physical separation. It may be as flimsy as a plastic post, it might be curbs, it might be planters, on or adjacent to the roadway. So different from a recreational path that goes out across the fields. St. Louis, Missouri, not a really progressive city, is building protected bike lanes. This is the consultant who had helped to design this new lane. In Vancouver, they are using planters. These are plastic planters, removable planters. They put them on in a temporary way because the businesses downtown were horrified by the idea of having a bike lane through the middle of downtown. It also took away parking, which is incredibly difficult to do. So they did this in a temporary fashion with the idea that they could tweak the design. They could also take it out if it didn't work. The great story from Vancouver is that now, 5 years later, the Downtown Business Association is like, well, this is part of our identity. This is who we are downtown. The guy actually said, you know, we were wrong, that these bike lanes did not ruin downtown. In fact, they've made it better. So now Vancouver is planning to go in and do more concrete, put in real planters, permanent planters. Here's Austin. This was a big street project where they put in red concrete. They used red, you know, it's okay. And then curbs that they set in place to provide that separation. So clearly, we do not have one design for these in the United States, and it's because it started at the city level. Cities were frustrated that they wanted this design in their toolbox. They wanted to be able to use it in places where it made sense. And the federal government was like, oh no, you can't build these. So we had sort of a city revolt, and they started building these. And so now we have all sorts of different designs. But we're moving toward, I think we're moving toward more standard designs. Here's San Francisco, a much more, you know, beautiful facility with landscaping and designated loading spaces so that the cars and trucks that need to load don't have to park in the bike lane. They actually have a space of their own. Indianapolis took a little bit of a different track. This is called the Cultural Trail. It's basically a multi-use path, 7 miles that links every major destination in downtown Indianapolis. So this has become a tourist attraction in its own right if people want to come and ride the Cultural Trail. It has also become the new waterfront in Indianapolis. Okay, Indianapolis doesn't have a waterfront, all right? They're in the middle of the Great Plains. They don't even really have much of a river. And so this has become the desired place for new development. So this went through some areas that were economically depressed. Now people are coming in, they're refurbishing apartment buildings, they want to put their restaurants along this cultural trail. Even Atlanta, okay, heart of cardom on earth, is doing things like this, of retrofitting streets through their downtown to make them work better for people on foot and people on bike. So we've been tracking these protected bike lanes. When New York City started building these, there were about 20 on the ground that had been built in bits and pieces over the years in the United States. So we've seen more than a 10-fold increase in protected bike lanes. There's now 320 of them on the ground in almost 100 US cities, and there's more being added every day. This inventory is on our website if you want to go see all the cities that have built them. So the research is starting to come in on these. This is another shot of San Francisco where they have, several thousand people a day using this main corridor through downtown. Portland State University, a research group in Oregon, they looked at 8 new protected bike lanes and did surveys, did crash data analysis. They looked at video footage of intersection operations and came up with a lot of interesting conclusions. They surveyed people who lived along the corridors, and this was one of the findings. They asked if people agreed with this statement. I would be more likely to ride a bicycle if motor vehicles and bicycles were separated by a barrier. 2/3 of all the residents along the corridor said yes. 85% of people who identified themselves as interested but concerned said yes. So clearly that target population really likes the idea of these facilities. This is a design from a suburb of Los Angeles, sort of a more robust design with nice landscaping along the edge. 96% of the people surveyed, and this was anybody who had ridden bikes on these corridors, on protected bike lanes felt safer on the street because of the lanes. So that's a pretty big percentage, and it includes both the Isabellas, the moms with the kids. It also included more competent riders who liked the added protection, as long as these didn't slow them down, as long as they were direct and efficient and made sense. They were actually more comfortable as well. So across these corridors, what we found is that in the first year, protected bike lanes were increasing bicycle traffic by an average of 75%. So we're seeing more people using the lanes, including some of this was diversion from other routes that people tended to come to this safe street. It was also new people riding. All right, here's another one in Washington, D.C. And interestingly, they did a lot of surveys of drivers, and they found that drivers like these because they order the street. They create more predictability. Like, drivers are often frustrated with people on bikes, and a part of that comes from they don't know what the bikes are going to do, right? They're afraid they're going to hit them. Why are they in the street? What are they doing? So this idea of ordering the street so that there's a place for pedestrians, there's a place for bikes, there's a place for cars, works for everybody. We've seen significant decreases in people riding bikes on sidewalks. In our cities, you're not allowed to ride bikes on sidewalks generally. People do, not really to be jerks, but they do it because that's where they feel safe. So these lanes are getting people off the sidewalks. Am I out of time yet? I'm okay? Okay, good. Got it. Okay, so like I said, when the city started to build these, they were not in any of our design guidelines. Who's a traffic engineer, designer? Nobody? Oh, hi! Okay, it's really important. If you go waltzing out to your engineers and designers and say, you need to build these, if they're not in the design guidance, your it's really hard to convince your traffic engineers to build these. Same thing in the United States. So first step was our cities went to our federal government and said, please, we need these designs in our toolbox. Federal government said, oh no, you can't build those. So the cities came out with their own design guidebook called the Urban Bikeway Design Guide, put out by a bunch of cities that showed how you could take existing standards and guidance and build these. That was a big step. Next, what happened is our federal government said, well, we don't have standard designs for these, but you can go ahead and be flexible. So they basically put the seal of approval on the Urban Bikeway Design Guide. Since then, our federal government has come out with a guide on how to build those, and we'll get the last piece soon. Our version of ERA is being updated, and it will include protected bike lanes. So that's about done. Okay, one of the challenges with these is intersections. They're tricky, right? You got to get across intersections safely. So we've been doing things like this. This is what we call a mixing zone, where the person on the bike comes up and they want to go straight and they veer over to that green patch of safety, and the cars that want to turn left come into that hatched zone. And so they have to do a little dance. It's not elegant, but it's working pretty well. We have variations on these. They use these in Copenhagen. It's not perfect. Better is if you can just give people on bikes their own signal phase to go straight, but that requires holding the left-turning cars and sometimes the traffic gets too bad if you do that. So we're working on this. Vancouver, is doing some two-way facilities. They're doing bike-specific signals, so the bikes have their own phase with no turning traffic across it. There's this idea of protected intersections, like actually getting to Dutch level of designs. This is a great video by a guy named Nick Falbo. And I'll send you links to all of this stuff. I'll provide them to Burkhart and ADFC, and they can share them. It's worth looking at. We're starting to build these in the United States. This one is in Salt Lake City in Utah. There's about 4 of them on the ground, really robust intersection treatments. Okay, so there's some details about how to get this right. I won't go through all of this. I'll provide the presentation for you. But basically, you can design these to work really well. We are launching a new project called The Big Jump. So we did the Green Lane project. Now our next project is The Big Jump, because we've got protected bike lanes well underway in the United States. Now we're moving on to the next frontier of what can a sort of small and strategic band of advocates push next. So the idea is, you can't just build a protected bike lane. You need a complete network that gets people to places where they want to go safely. Because Mom's not going to let Isabella ride, even if there's a protected bike lane, if then Isabella has to be out on a really busy street for 6 blocks before she gets to school. So it's really about complete networks. There's 3 pieces to these networks. So one is protected bike lanes. Another one is using local streets, where you can slow the cars down and you can reduce the volume of cars. The other one is completely separated pathways and safe crossings. So these are the networks. This is our idea. We need to really push the idea of complete networks. We build good separated paths in the United States. That's sort of what we have. That's our asset to build on. This is a new one by where I live. It's really cool, mostly a tourism facility, but it's going to connect from Denver International Airport all the way up to the Continental Divide in Colorado, about 150 miles. So come ride when we get it done in a few years. We do a lot of tunnels, separations on these pathways. So quick on the network side. So this is, we made this city up, but basic city, here's the street grid. Jobs are in red, schools are in blue, parks are in green. If you look at our network, the safe places to bike, the protected bike lanes, slow streets, and multi-use pathways, that's kind of what it looks like, okay? It's like a little bit of spaghetti thrown on the wall. They don't connect at all. So the concept is that we need to connect these so that you can get to jobs, you can get to parks, you can get to education. So our goal is that every city by 2020 in the United States should at least be planning this kind of a network. Okay, so there's this idea in the United States, if you build it, they will come. Give them good infrastructure, they'll be out there. Smart guy Roger Geller was like, well, that's kind of true, but really you need, if you build the right thing in the right place and promote it well, then they will come. That you can't just put out good infrastructure, you need to actually do the other stuff to get people bike riding. We think it's about a 3/4, 1/4 split. That for us, it's 3/4 fixing our infrastructure, it's about 1/4 the other stuff, which is events that get people out on bikes, it's education, it's bike share, it's e-bikes, it's the whole world of encouragement and education promotion. So our keys to accelerating progress is we work with city leaders. We've been taking delegations of city leaders to the Netherlands and Denmark for 6 years. We've taken like 300 city leaders over there, including elected officials, top city staff, business leaders, implementation staff, more business leaders, elected officials, local funders, the foundations that fund things, the local advocates, because when we can get this arc of leaders together talking about how they are going to make change, that's when we really see things happen. That the advocates are great, but if you can get your elected officials on board saying, this is what we're going to do for our community, then you can accelerate change. So this has been really powerful for us. Also engaging community leaders from the African-American community, from the Latino community. And these people are not bike people. They're not like, oh, I love bicycles. They see bikes as a tool to improve their communities, to make their neighborhoods work better. And that's really powerful when you get these people at the table as well. So you get them all together, and voila, you build new protected bike lanes. That's the mayor of Denver. Michael Hancock in the middle with that whole group of community leaders celebrating a new bike lane. Quickly, I want to talk about what we call quick build techniques. So this is getting stuff built faster. We're getting pretty good at this. This is New York City, 2 views of Broadway from above. Before is on this side, after is on that side. That is paint and planters and some signs. And they have created new public space. They have created a new bike lane. They actually made the traffic more efficient through there. And they did that in about 3 months to completely change how that street worked. This is Seattle, where the mayor of Seattle said, we are going to put a protected bike lane on 2nd Avenue. It's one of their main corridors through downtown. And we're going to do it before our bike share system opens. So it was all hands on deck with the engineers and the contractors, and everybody went all out to get this thing built because there was political urgency to get it done. They did it in about 4 months, which is amazing. I mean, I used to work for the city of Boulder, and we estimated it took us 6 years to get a transportation project from when we pulled it off the plan to actual ribbon cutting. So even for the United States, you know, this is pretty fast to get these done. This is the traffic engineer in Seattle who has just been an amazing master of traffic revision, as he puts it. This is Portland. You can see where they took the old bike lane stripe off the street. That's paint and planters. And all of a sudden, it's a whole different environment for people on bikes riding there. Again, this is Portland. They trucked in some planters, put dirt in. There are flowers in there now. So, you know, ugly, but really efficient, because the idea was this is one of their neighborhood greenways, their slow speed side streets that they want to prioritize for bikes, and there were too many drivers driving down it. So they just said, okay, cars are not, like, you can still get into the neighborhood, but you can't use it as a cut through. So you come up in a car, you're forced to turn right, and bikes can go through. So not elegant, but pretty functional, and they have gone back and put in flowers, so now it looks a little bit better, you know, for the aesthetic people in the room. Okay, this is another version in Memphis. Again, if you can imagine what this intersection looked like before, that was really fast turn for cars. Cars were just booking through there. Pedestrians had a lot of trouble getting across these streets. There are not traffic signals there. Again, that is paint and planters, and they really changed how that street worked quickly. You know, there's a conventional bike lane, but much shorter pedestrian crossing distances. There's now food trucks parking on that corner with tables, and there's people out using this area. So we were really intrigued by this. So we went out and we interviewed a bunch of cities. We put out a report on how cities are gearing up internally to make these changes. I have a few copies of it, and you can find it on your website. Give it to all your favorite city officials, because it goes through the steps of how cities sort of figured out how to do this, because this isn't standard practice for them, right? The paying for it and the scheduling of the work and the teams that need to do it. It's not rocket science, though. As somebody said the other day, the politics of it are rocket science. The design and implementation are not. Okay, so there's sort of this spectrum of quick build ranging from demonstration projects like the one that you saw in Cologne in Philip Chris' video, you know, very quick things that are very temporary, all the way up to permanent installation. And we're working on things that are pilot projects or interim designs. The idea is that you can put these designs down on the ground and then change them, like tweak them, move the planters, move the posts, add different paint. It can also be part of the public process, because usually in the United States we have huge fights before the thing's ever built, like, dude, don't do it, you're going to ruin my neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. You actually can put these on the ground and say they're going to be here for 6 months or a year, and let's talk about it, and let's tweak it, and then we'll take it out if it doesn't work. So it's pretty exciting. Basically, our engineering, design, construction sort of grew up around the idea that we're building big interstates. And you know what? Bike lanes are not interstates, and we don't have to use the same big ponderous techniques. So this is Memphis, where they actually had neighborhood volunteers out, you know, building new bike lanes. We have a guerrilla movement in the United States, impatient. I mean, our cities are moving pretty quickly, but not fast enough for a lot of our advocates, bless them. So they're going out and actually putting these posts on. They cost about 15 euros. You can buy those online in a can of what we call Gorilla Glue, and they're just sticking them out there. On this one, the city of San Francisco was like, you can't do that. You know, no, 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 no. So they went out and took them out, right? But then they went out and put them back in. And they said, well, you're right. I guess we can add this extra protection to these lanes. I'll tell you a quick story. Rogers, Arkansas, south, conservative place. This is a fairly small town. We took a bunch of leaders from this area on a study tour to Copenhagen. They came back all excited about changing how their streets work. They decided that they were going to do a month-long pilot project. So I happened to be there last week and got to take some pictures. They're out there measuring the street. This is a cool little machine that you stick a can of spray paint in upside down, and then you pull the trigger, and it's got a little arrow, and you can just make new lines on the street. Insta lines. That's my boss, Tim Blumenthal, in the middle, restriping the street. Okay, so the roads in Rogers, Arkansas are really wide, and there's not very many cars. So they just took the right turn lane and made it a two-way protected bike lane, just glued these posts down. One of the ideas is that some of the public feedback will be like, what kind of posts do you like? How should we separate these lanes? So they are trying things like armadillo. These are called armadillos. They were invented in Barcelona. They're another way of providing that visual separation to lanes. So they're checking out the armadillos. These are just stencils and spray paint, right? Just cans of spray paint. Here's actually one of the bike stencils. I think they found a box that a refrigerator came in, a cardboard box, and cut out the stencil to do it. So pretty quick. They made signs. This is on like cardboard, but they look official signs. They're done with little zip ties, these plastic ties, you know, a bucket, some concrete, and voila, better bike infrastructure. Temporary, but effective. And so this team of about 8 people built 2/3 of a kilometer of bike lane in a day. So they linked the activity center, the recreation center in Rogers, to the bike park with 2/3 of a mile of this infrastructure. You know, it's not elegant, but it's a really cool experiment, and it lets the people in this small town of Rogers see the possibility really quickly. All right, final thing, communicate well. It's one of the things that we really focus on with People for Bikes is talk about these things in ways that really work. Our big challenge in the United States is parking. Like, in most of our cities, these are retrofit projects happening curb to curb. We're not rebuilding the whole street. So it means we're taking away space from somebody else, usually it's cars. We are not taking away space from pedestrians. We're not cannibalizing the sidewalk. We're going for car space. So we're taking either parking or travel lanes. Travel lanes are easier because people don't feel ownership over that. Parking's really hard. We have a great blogger who writes, you know, best practices, how we make the argument, how cities have made the argument to calm down people panicked about taking away parking. We use stats like this. You wouldn't believe, I mean, parking is not written into our Constitution, but you would think it is. So we use statistics like these because it's, you know, they're afraid that it's going to ruin their business. So this is a study. People who arrive at a business on bikes spend less per visit, but visit more often, and they end up spending more money overall at these businesses. So that's slightly comforting. 10 customers who arrive by bike fit in the parking space of 1 customer who arrives by car, because some of these business owners think that a parking space is the only way that a customer gets to their business. Done? Okay, I gotta wrap up here. I'm almost done, really, honestly. Okay, and finally, this is Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Randy's mayor. I need to acknowledge Randy works for the SRAM Cycling Fund. Okay, SRAM is a bike component manufacturer. They have facilities here in Germany. They work internationally. They have been an incredible supporter of bike advocacy at all levels. One of the great ways that they support bike advocacy is sending the brilliant Randy Neufeld out on the road to help people like me, like ADFC, like everybody else. So if you haven't met Randy, make sure you do that. Okay, whew. All right. Okay, so this is Randy's mayor, And I actually heard on the slide that somebody whose initials might be RN actually whispered in the mayor's ear during his campaign and said, you know, you really should make a pledge to build 100 miles of protected bikeways and it would get you more votes. And so he did. And this is his reason, okay? He's not really a bike guy. I mean, he likes bikes. But he said you cannot be for a startup high-tech economy and not be pro-bike. So he's talking about how all of these tech companies that Chicago wants to have in downtown, they want to hire the very smartest young people. And those young people in the United States want to live in walkable, bikeable areas. So doing this is an economic development strategy for downtown Chicago, and that's why he's doing it. Okay, I told you about Big Jump. It's our idea. We're going to work with 10 cities over the next 3 years to prove this concept that if cities build complete networks of safe, comfortable places to ride, they will see a big jump in biking. So stay tuned for us. We have all this cool stuff going on with that. We're launching another program called Places for Bikes where any city can track their progress. It's a ranking system that's really focused on acceleration. And that's it. So we need to build complete bicycle systems. We need to accelerate progress on building those systems. So that's the US story. I'm really excited about the conversations going on here in Germany. We will continue to look to you for ways to do this even better. So thank you.